What's going on, guys? My name is Tim Roswick, and today I want to talk to you about why I don't think games should be realistic. Thinking, Tim, hey, we want to play games that are realistic. We like to play Call of Duty or whatever. First of all, there's no real game that's 100% realistic. Let's just be real. Not even VR can come close at this point to making something that really is 100% realistic. There's stuff that can make you suspend disbelief, right? And there's a lot of games that can immerse you, even stuff that's completely unrealistic, like 2D platformers or anything like that. If you do it right, you can have immersion in a game. You can really draw the person out of their seats, and I think that's really valuable. So people say they want to make a realistic game. Usually their goal is that immersion. Their goal is that endpoint of trying to pull the people out of their minds into the story, into the world. And I think you can get there without that realism. For example, I go see movies a lot. I usually, on an average week, I'll probably see one movie a week. Maybe I'll go to a movie theater and see it because I like to see movies, and I can't really get that escapism, that immersion, when I'm sitting at home, and especially if it's on a computer or something like that, where I do my work, or in bed on an iPad or something. It doesn't work for me like movie theaters do. So I go to movie theaters and I get that experience. I usually like to sit up in the front row. I go on like a Tuesday or something. Nobody's there. And I'll just go alone and I'll watch the movie and I'll be completely immersed. And I love that. But it's not the realism in the movie that pulls me in. I feel like it's more that environment. If I'm completely honest, I don't think it's anything like that. And I think in games that think that realism equals immersion is just wrong. And secondly, this is the other major point here, because immersion is the goal, right? That's what you want. You want to pull someone out of their brain and put them in your world. And if you can successfully do that, it doesn't really matter how you do that, you win. But the thing is, realistic things, realism, like real, true realism, sometimes has the opposite effect. It pulls you out of immersion. For example, let's say you have a completely realistic shooter, 100% realistic shooter. So you run and you're going to go shoot this guy. And as you do, the dude starts crying and throws his gun down and pisses his pants and screams and says he has a family and all kinds of shit, and it's horrible. And then let's say you shoot him anyway and it's horribly graphic and he rolls over and screaming in agony. And it's ridiculously you know what I mean? That's realism in a sense. Nobody wants to play that. And if you do, I can't make games for you. I'm sorry. But there's a lot of you would get hungry in games. You would get thirsty or tired. You would make worse judgment. Weather would affect stuff. The enemies would be completely unpredictable. You would be walking one day and you just get shot in the back of the head and die. That would be the game that you're playing. It would be unfair. It would be stupid. It would be ridiculous. You'd be fighting, if you're playing a shooter and you're fighting 100 dudes, in a level, all those 100 dudes are as smart as you are. And you can't play a game like that. It's unrealistic. So one of the things that I've learned for good game design is to not actually make enemies realistic, not actually design games to be realistic. Even things like platformers, there's still people that try and make things realistic. They try and make jumps feel realistic or whatever. But realistic jumps in platformers suck, man. They're horrible. You don't want a realistic jump. You know how high I jump? I jump about 6 inches, maybe a foot. All right. Even Olympic jumpers, they can't jump as high as Master Chief could in Halo. Master Chief jumps 2 car heights of jump, and he's and that was fun. That was cool. In platformers, it's even more important, right? You got to jump off and do all kinds of crazy ledges and stuff, and double jump that can't exist in realism. So not only is realism just, I don't think it makes sense, but on top of that, I think it makes better game design to not design stuff realistic. And I think specifically this definitely comes into play when you're designing enemies. It definitely comes in with all the other mechanics like jumps and stuff like that, but with enemies specifically, this is something I learned in Philophobia, that you don't want enemies to be realistic. You don't want enemies to even be smart. You want them to be predictable. And the reason why this is so important is because people play games to escape reality, right? And a lot of times the problems that they have with reality is usually having to do with not having a clear goal, not understanding what they should be doing, feeling boredom, feeling hungry, tired, sleepy, whatever. They want to be entertained. They want to be pulled out of their life. They just want to experience something. And by giving them an unpredictable experience, a completely unpredictable experience, like if, let's say you had a legit AI as an enemy, it wouldn't be fun. Like, you want to know as a player, I want to know as a player, when I'm going to play something, I should be able to figure out how the enemies work and then use my knowledge of that to overcome the encounters. I think this is especially true in platformers. It's pretty much true in a lot of different genres. There are some exceptions. There always are. But in a platformer, for example, you want to know that, like, this guy goes back and forth. This guy, if you go near him, he'll chase you. This guy flies and tries to find you, You want to know those things. You really want to be able to figure out a behavior of an enemy so that you can use your skills and your knowledge to kind of overcome that obstacle and win the level. If the enemies are unpredictable, if they change their behaviors, I guarantee you're going to frustrate players and people are going to quit. And they may not even say the AI is unpredictable. They may just say, like, that dude is stupid, or that dude is broken, or I don't even know how to use it. Like, I've literally heard people describe super smart AI as broken because it's unpredictable. And they're not used to that. Maybe they can't articulate that, but if you have someone that's super smart, that's really like an enemy that really is smart as the player and can go around and figure out ways to kill him, that's not going to be fun, right? Like, I think people play PvP for that kind of experience, where they want people as smart as them. They want that experience. They want that aggressive player versus player kind of experience. But when they're playing single player, like, the enemies that they want to encounter are enemies that they want to be able to figure out. Even in shooters with little more complex AI that, runs to cover and does all that stuff, it's satisfying to know that if you throw a grenade, they're going to dive out of it. But then you can kind of, think ahead and say, okay, I'm going to throw a grenade in their cover. They're going to dive out of it. Then I'm going to shoot them. It's predictable. And I think because of that, it makes a better experience, because if an experience is too realistic, it becomes unfun. Like, what's the point of going into this realistic experience when I can have a realistic experience in the real world? And not only that, but I think life is completely unpredictable. And I know for me and a lot of people that I know, a lot of times we played games for that predictability, without knowing it, of course. Like, we don't say, oh, I want to play this game because it's predictable. But we play games because we know the rules. Like, life doesn't tell us the rules, right? It just puts us in here and, okay, figure shit out, right? Do I get a degree? Do I not? How do I make money? Do I start a company? Do I get a job? Do I what? There's no right answer. There's no correct way to win the level. You just got to fucking figure it out. And there's 1,000 different paths, and there's 1,000 different enemies and AIs, and they all work differently. And the shit's confusing as shit, man. It's hard to figure out. But in a game, this is your obstacle. This is your goal. Get there. This guy works like this. This guy works like this. Get to the goal. It's more satisfying, I think. And it plays on those reward centers in our brain that really, get excited about that kind of thing when we solve a problem, when we actually are presented with rules, we use those rules to our advantage and solve a problem. And I think that's how good games are designed, with an obstacle in front of a goal and very clear rules on how the world works. And I think it's so satisfying because the world doesn't have that. The real world does not have those sets of rules. We have to make our own rules in life. And it makes it so easy in games to kind of define those rules and kind of play by those rules. And once you figure that out, games, I think, become more fun. They once you figure out the how to beat it, like the moment. That's what I do. That's how I kill that guy. That's what that guy does. When you get to that moment and you know where the goal is, like, you just got to go. So I wish life was a little more like a video game sometimes. I wish life was a little more predictable. Not to say games always have to be unpredictable. There's plenty, or not to say they have to be predictable. There's plenty of times when unpredictability comes into play, but that predictability in certain things, especially with enemies, especially with mechanics. You want to be able to predict them as much as possible, and they don't necessarily have to be realistic. They have to be predictable, and that's what's important in games, in my opinion. But I hope you found this useful. If you did, please leave a like and a comment down below. If you got anything to add to this, maybe there's anything I missed. You ever develop something that's predictable? You ever develop something that's realistic? What did you think? Did it work out? Did it not? Let me know in the comments down below. Once again, I'm Tim Rustwick, and I will see you again tomorrow.